I'm doing pretty good, aside from my ancient dog I just told you about. Yeah, aside from that guy. Why don't you just introduce yourself? And from all I know about you is you're a smart guy because you're involved in nuclear fusion, and you can normally tell with my podcast they go on like a string of. I'll have on like one Air Force guy, and then I'll have on like 9 more because I'll get really interested in that.
Yeah.
And like last week, I was just watching something on nuclear fusion, and I was like, well, I just got to get everyone with nuclear fusion on now. So I got you, I got another guy on Wednesday, another guy on Friday. I'm just like, yeah, now I want to learn everything about nuclear fusion. So yeah, why don't you introduce yourself, man?
So my name's Jackson Merritt. I'm a senior, about to graduate this May in nuclear engineering with a degree from Texas A&M University in nuclear engineering. Yeah, I mean, basically it right there. So.
Yeah, man. So one thing I had on a guy that was a nuclear power plant operator, and I had another guy that was getting his PhD in nuclear fusion at the University of Rochester. And so the one thing that I've kind of realized talking to both these people is like they're explaining it, and I'm staring at them with like my mouth open, and I'm like, why is this not everywhere? Why are we not building nuclear power plants like we're building McDonald's? Like if it's truly energy independence, and not even from like a nationalist point of view where it's like let's be energy independent, from a capitalist point of view. Look at something right now with coronavirus. What's today? 29 March 2020 for future reference. Yeah. We are in coronavirus lockdown. I'm looking at it as like from a capitalist standpoint. If you're in Texas, think about all the oil refineries there. If I'm correct, there are a ton of oil refineries, right?
There's a ton, yeah.
That is like there's 3 power grids in the United States: East Coast, West Coast, and Texas. Yeah, it's so just from a capitalist standpoint, I'm looking at if I'm an energy tycoon. I don't think anyone uses tycoon anymore. It's not the 1800s. It's a railroad bully. But like, if I'm an energy tycoon, dude, I don't want, even for something like coronavirus, but just in general, I don't want to be victim to markets going up and down. Any argument this and the economy drops, barrels of oil go up to here, or there's shipping there, or pirates, or tweets, or whatever. Just from a money standpoint. So not even the whole idyllic, like, we should have nuclear fusion. Yeah, and we should also ban crime. But, like, from a realistic standpoint, like, why is this not... There's got to be a catch. Is it just stupid people who are scared?
So we kind of, to go through all of that, you kind of have to start with the vilification of nuclear energy in general. So there's a great TED Talk by a guy, his name's Michael Schellenberger, and he goes into this a lot. Basically, it all starts in California in probably about the 60s. Basically, California is going to build 3 nuclear power plants. So you have Diablo Canyon, which is currently operational, and then you have 2 other power plants. And these 2 never get built. And the reason is basically oil, gas, and coal really don't like nuclear because it's a big deal. It's a big threat to their stability because it produces so much energy, and it has a really good longevity. So there's some toss up about what really goes on in terms of the government and their hands in trying to make nuclear energy look back. Basically what happens is this big campaign starts, and you have nuclear energy. If you have a nuclear meltdown in a power plant, you're going to get it like a Hiroshima level event. You're going to have a nuclear explosion. Yeah. It's going to be awful. We've seen that that's not the case. Obviously, meltdowns are terrible, but they're not nearly to that extent where an entire city is going to get erased off the map if that happens. Eventually, what happens is you get Sierra Club, who originally was for nuclear energy, goes against it. They switch sides. And then, clubs start popping up. So there's Mothers Against Nuclear, which is a big thing back then. And you get to this point where you get to this really terrible movie called The China Syndrome. And it's basically the entire point of this movie is vilifying nuclear energy. Like you have a meltdown, one hasn't occurred yet. And so they're going off of what it's a typical sci-fi movie. They're just coming up with BS.
Yeah.
2 weeks later, after this movie comes out, you have 3 Mile Island occur. So it's not a big deal. Basically, what happens is 3 Mile Island, you have you have your core, and you've got this thing called a pressurizer. Reactor trips, the control rod's going like it's supposed to, but what happens is on this pressurizer that's supposed to keep pressure in the system at a certain point so that you can keep pumping coolant over the core to keep it cool, the relief valve gets stuck open, and nobody catches that immediately. So eventually the pressurizer, the water level drops, and eventually you have a core exposure. It gets fixed really quickly, but there is a radiation release. Wasn't bad. Out of everyone who was nearby, there was no danger to anybody, even in the facility. Higher dose than normal, but really no big deal. But what happens is the media gets a hold of this. They don't know nothing about nuclear energy. So the story goes that you have these newsrooms, and they say, who's seen the China syndrome? Because this only released 2 weeks ago. And some intern in the back raises his hand. He's like, hey, I've seen it. And so that's how they report on this thing. And so that's really where nuclear energy got its kind of the hysteria surrounding it occurs, is with 3 Mile Island and just the kind of this weird release of the China syndrome. And so there's a lot of fear surrounding it. We eventually had Chernobyl not 20 years later, and Chernobyl was horrific. I don't know if you've seen the TV show, but they really do that.
Yeah.
They do that a lot of justice, just with how bad. And, there's a lot of factors that went into just why that got so bad. The government was working against them and all that stuff. And then you have in the 2010s, we in the industry, it started to be calling what's known as the nuclear renaissance, right? So we're thinking like, all right, we've moved past Chernobyl. The public's finally thinking, hey, we've got this thing down. We're gonna really sell nuclear energy and start selling it as a great thing. And then in 2011, you have Fukushima, which really was on the plant site operator. So basically, you have the IAEA, which is probably the only branch of the UN that I actually like.
Yeah.
The International Atomic Energy Agency. And they go one day and they do a typical inspection, and they tell these guys at the plant, hey, so it's not super credible, but y'all have like these massive tsunamis that hit like every 100 years, and you're a little bit overdue. So we would recommend like your backup diesel generators are at like 23 feet high. We're saying put them at 64 feet high. Not a super big deal. You just got to move these diesel generators. Well, they never did that. And then so the tsunami hits, their diesel generators flood, and now they can't cool their reactor once the grid goes down. So we're in a weird spot right now. Nuclear energy, with all of the green stuff going on, there's a lot of hope for it. But right now, also the biggest thing we're running into is power plants. I'm sure the reactor operator you talked to mentioned this, but reactors are licensed to operate for 40 years by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, and then they have to go through a review process to get that extended. A lot of them right now are going for that, and they're not getting extended for whatever reason.
Jesus. Yeah, what the nuclear power plant operator talked about was that it's like when comparing building a power plant to, let's say, like a coal-powered power plant or something. And it's like the initial input cost, and then it's how quickly how quickly does it turn around and start getting you that fucking sweet paper. But the problem is it's so it seems like, obviously, just from the market standpoint, it's like you want to get a bang for your buck, and so there you go do coal, you go do natural gas, whatever. What do you think would cause, or what do you think would spur a construction boom of nuclear power plants? Do you think it would have to be something like the government will pay for it, and then you can pay it back with like there would have to be some sort of incentive, almost like the solar panel, like I don't know the word, allowances or whatever, matching. There would have to be something where it'd be like, here's the whatever, $5 billion, build it, and you just start paying. You start paying us with the money coming in from it, and it'll be like a mortgage. It'll be like, it's gonna take 50 years to pay, but that will get these companies to start being like, all right, like another thing about it is like my push for nuclear energy. This isn't some like Rage Against the Machine, fuck Exxon Mobil or Shell, like, hey man, I'm all for those mega corporations. I think efficient stuff gets done with them. There's no reason why they can't turn to nuclear. You still keep your profits, still get insane profits. I don't care. It's like an argument of like legalizing marijuana. Like I had a guy, the Drug Users Bible author, we were talking about like legalizing pot. We're like, it doesn't have to be, you don't have to kick out these companies like Budweiser. It already has Bud in the name. Just start selling Bud. Like it's fine. Like you can still keep your profits. Like this isn't some like, communist revolution thing. It's like there has to be some sort of incentive. What do you think it would be that would lead to that?
So, if we're talking just from like a government wants to incentivize building more plants, I think subsidies is probably the best thing to do. You see subsidies with currently wind and solar, which are both considered very green, very safe forms of energy, which I could come up with some arguments about that. But you have nuclear, which zero CO2 emissions, but we get left out of that because the public doesn't really like us too much. And so in terms of what is the private sector doing, we're doing quite a lot, or they're doing quite a lot. So NuScale is one of the big ones. And so what we're trying to do is enter new markets that we haven't before. Currently, you have this massive reactor fleet. I mentioned Diablo Canyon's one. In Texas, we have South Texas Project and Comanche Peak. Those are the two reactors that we have here. And those are large-scale commercial nuclear power plants that are meant to support the grid at large. So then you have companies like NuScale that are entering the scene. These guys are developing small modular reactors or micro reactors. They don't produce a ton of energy. We're talking maybe a megawatt up to 20 megawatts. What these are designed to support is, so NuScale, they would probably want to get on the big grid as a whole. Micro reactors, I can't think of any companies off the top of my head that are building any. I know one has gone into a licensing process. What they want to do is, so you have remote areas like Alaska, northern Canada. Let's talk about the Siberia of Russia. They want to get into those markets. You can build one of these little reactors. You don't have to work. And you can get these small scale grids and you can enter those markets it also for like a fraction of the cost. Because we got tired of waiting around for government money. So we thought, well, if we scale these reactors down, we can build these things and start making money quickly. Because, that's the biggest hang up, right? It's a mountain of cash before you can start actually producing yourself.
So the nuclear operator guy, he talked about he has like a 3-letter acronym for it. Whatever the small ones are.
SMRs.
SMRs, yeah. Didn't Russia have something? I want to say it might have been in the Cold War. It might have just been in the last 20 years. I don't remember. Didn't they have like almost like the ships we're sending right now, like the Mercy and the Comfort, those hospital ships?
Mm-hmm.
Now we're sending them to U.S. cities, but we always send them to places hit by earthquakes or tsunamis all around the world. Didn't Russia have something where it was like a barge or a ship, but it was a nuclear power plant, and it was for like the Arctic regions where it would not just like a nuclear powered ship like we have those. It was something that would sort of dock, and it was literally like you could sort of plug into the ship almost. I mean, that's a simplified way. Do you think?
Yeah, I can't remember the name of the ship exactly, but it does exist. It came out about 2016. It's really ironic because its first mission was to go plug into a coal power plant out in the Siberian region, or not a coal power plant, but a coal mine. Yeah. But yeah, so it exists. Basically, I think it's insane. It's really cool, and it's probably safe, but they just built a floating nuclear power plant, and its only purpose is to produce power for coastline cities.
Yeah, in Soviet Russia, power comes to you.
Exactly.
So with the small power plants, the SMRs, or even the bigger power plants, and I want to say I read this somewhere. I'm sure, again, I don't have any knowledge in this, so whatever I'm thinking of, like the bleeding edge, I'm sure you're just like, but wouldn't it make sense to, or are nuclear reactors today built to where something like you you'd almost want to. I'm trying to think of like almost like a dead man switch. Like a dead man switch, it like stays quiet unless you're like shooting the thing at. Well, that's a terrible example. That's the exact opposite. Right now, you need power to constantly cool it, and you have the backup generators, and you have the backup generators. But stuff happens. Chernobyl, or I don't know, just a tsunami coming and destroying it. Wouldn't you want to get it to a point where it doesn't melt down with loss of power? Wouldn't you want it to where if power cuts out, it's designed in such a way that it dies?
So that's what. So that's the big push right now with Generation 4 reactors. So currently, our most modern reactors have always operated in generations. So you have Gen 1, Gen 2, Fukushima and Chernobyl would both considered Gen 2 reactors, and then you have Gen 3, which is our current. So that's like an AP1000 is a good example of a Gen 3. It's typically a pressurized water reactor. So it's closed cycle, meaning all the water that goes to cool the core stays in that area. We're not like, because one of the big fears with BWRs, you'd see the steam rising off and people would be like, well, what if there's radiation in that water? Not a real concern, but we just adjusted for it and it worked great. And so you have Gen 4s. And so basically these are expected to maybe start rolling out in the 2030s, early 2040s, because it's a long time to develop, to design, and to eventually get a government license to build one of those. So what are some examples of these Generation 4 reactors, these advanced reactors? So sodium-cooled fast reactors. So what that is just instead of using – so most reactors we use, or all reactors at this point, we use water to cool the reactors and they moderate our neutrons. Moderation just means slowing them down. Some guys have come up, so we would go back to a graphite moderated core, but instead of using water, which with Chernobyl we had graphite moderated, and I could go into more detail about that, but it was water cooled. The water eventually boiled off of that reactor and caused the hydrogen explosion that resulted in the absolute disaster that it was. So now it's sodium cooled. Sodium, really high thermal heat capacity. So just in terms of the core getting hot enough to melt down, that's really going to be hard when it's sitting in this it's a massive vat of just molten salt. And then you don't have the issue where, well, if the water boils and the hydrogen and the oxygen separate, you could get an explosion. That's removed. Other types are lead cooled. I've actually done a lot of research because my capstone project, my senior design project, worked with a lead cooled reactor. It's really interesting because again, lead has a super high specific heat capacity, so it holds a lot of energy. Also, we use lead as a solid lead as a shield all the time. So if that lead were to solidify, your core becomes inert. So that's really cool. Other things are like high temperature HTGRs or high temperature gas reactors. You have SCWRs, which are supercritical water reactors. So going back to like physics in high school, when you talk about like steam charts, you have the supercritical point, and that's basically where that reactor would operate at. So yeah, I mean, and all of these reactors really have the inherent design of if literally just something terrible happened and everyone on that site dropped dead, you could take up to like 2 to 4 weeks to get back to it, and it would be okay, know.
Yeah, so I wrote down, I was going to ask you, but you read my mind and went right to it. I was going to ask, because I know water's got a pretty solid specific heat capacity, but I was going to ask, what other fluids, or I guess fluid-like substances, I guess that includes molten salt. What you said about lead I made a really brilliant note. I wrote lead. Awesome. But, like, that makes sense, though. Like, I didn't know that it had a high specific heat, but, like, that's two birds with one stone. Like, not only would it be a good heat transfer, but if it's solidified and there's less, it solidifies in its own tomb. Like, that's so what
all you got to do is cool the lead down and you're fine. But that's the hard part is, so if you have a runaway reaction, the hard part is the heat inside of it keeps increasing. So really what you got to do is, I mean, as long as you just keep putting lead over it, you keep cycling that lead, eventually it gets to a point where it's cool enough, the density increases, and then as the density of lead increases, it becomes it just starts becoming its own tomb.
It's like It's like in Chernobyl. It's like, well, we poured this onto it and it turned into lava. And he's like, you made lava. It's like, yes, that was expected. Yeah, it's you made lava. We need all of the liquid nitrogen of the Soviet Union. All of it. I remember hearing that. I was like, Jesus, all of it. So I guess we're like venturing into like doomsday mad scientist shit, but like now why wouldn't we put one of these in like the Arctic where like it is going to be like this, like that nuclear reactor could never use, it could never produce enough. If something produced enough heat to melt all of that, well then we have bigger problems than a nuclear reactor. Is that, I mean, what's the, I guess the obvious problem would be transferring all the energy. How would you get it out? Is there something, is there any reasoning or logic behind like just taking any of these reactors and just like you just start building them underground in like a lead tomb anyway, and so it's like no matter what happens, it's just under there. It's gonna, you know, am I a stupid person taking it?
No, it's a good question. It's just so like building reactors in the Arctic, there's just no current infrastructure that would be able to transfer power like that far to then maybe like South Carolina or not South Carolina, but South America or Africa. That's probably about maybe the closest you could get. There's just nothing there for that. In terms of burying them, so we don't do that very often. Currently, one of the biggest benefits to burying is really just shielding. I mentioned my capstone project. So what we're doing is we're designing a reactor for a hypothetical Martian colony. And so rather than letting it sit on top, like the core, we're just saying, well, if we just bury the core, stick a shielding cap on top, and then you can still control the reactivity from it, then you're shielded and it's fine. You know, there's not a whole lot of fear there of radiation getting out. If it melts down, maybe, but the idea would be that we would just build it far enough away that it would never be a problem.
Yeah, we got a whole planet to destroy over there. Oh yeah,
exactly.
Just ditch it, man. Yeah. Wait, so that's pretty badass. Can we go into that? You're designing stuff for a Mars colony? Shit, I didn't even think about that. I was like, what's cooler than nuclear energy on Earth? And it's like nuclear energy in space. Like,
yeah. So our project is super inventive. So basically, what we're doing is we're calling it the MFKR reactor, or the multifunction kilopower reactor. You get what I'm saying? I came up with the name,
dude. So I have a subreddit called Funner History.
Oh yeah.
And I purposely spelled it wrong, and it's just the first one ever was I took like an SR-71 Blackbird and put it in like World War II. I just photoshopped it, and it's just like, hey, it's so stupid, it's funner. It's since in a year blown up to like 19,000 subscribers, but there's people just like everyone just, it's always just fake history, right? You know, it's like flamethrower boats and like Civil War. One of them and sometimes I'll try to really sell them and I'll put like corporate logos on it. One of them was I photoshopped this huge rocket for SpaceX, and it was supposed to be like 10 times stronger than the Falcon Heavy, and it was for like a one-shot Mars trip, and it was the mass transfer heavy rocket, like kilotons. But yeah, it was motherfucker. But it was just, I mean, yeah, that's hilarious. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's great. So kind of what we're trying to do is, so NASA already has a reactor that they designed. It's called Krusty. And yeah, it's called Krusty. It's based off of The Simpsons. It's great. NASA's got a sense of humor. Yeah. They did all their tests. It performed great. Basically, now they're just waiting. Like, hey, we got to actually get people there. So kind of our design incorporates that. But so Krusty is 4 individual units that each produce 10 kilowatts electric each in order to generate the 40 kilowatts electric that they assume that they need for the mission. We're doing 2 specific things. So Krusty, you have the core, you've got its heat transfer system, its power generation system, and then you have this massive radiating disk that just shoots off the excess heat into the Martian atmosphere. And that works. We think that's great, but we're trying to see if we can't come up with a couple things. So one of them is why transfer 4 units if we can just slap it all into one. I'm doing core design, and that's been really interesting trying to see how that works, because getting up to, we're looking at 50 kilowatts electric in one single unit. It's pretty big, maybe too heavy. I'm still working with that. The other thing we want to do is, so NASA, their reactor just kind of spits all the heat off into the atmosphere. Or we're thinking like, well, what if we could make it do other things? So one of the guys on my team has been doing a lot of work on trying to see if we produce a little bit of extra power, could we support electrolysis? So like they found salt water on Mars. That'd be really cool. How about just passive heating of the room? Like Martian atmosphere is like negative 40 degrees centigrade. It's really cold, and so just like creating a system of radiators that we would just pump working fluid through to heat up stuff. And then we also talked about the electrolysis would be with the oxygen generation. The other thing that kind of set us on this path of making it like multi-purpose is so Martian soil is like really high in perchlorates, which is I guess super toxic to people. I guess it really causes like thyroid cancer basically. So we thought like, well, what if we, and so this is assuming the guy can get everything he needs done. This is his last part, and hopefully we'll get there. We've got about a month left. Could we develop a system based off of the heat produced by the reactor to burn those off, and then they have fresh soil that they could use to grow crops, and then they have water, they have oxygen, they make their own CO2 for the plants, and then you got even with the electrolysis, you have extra hydrogen to produce rocket fuel. And so, I mean, these are all just things that we've thought of. So it's really cool. And so,
that kind of seems, the idea of having that huge disk radiating heat, that kind of, from a layman's term, or from my point of view, that just seems stupid as shit. Why would you waste all that? That is energy to, again, from my armchair, I've now had on 3 nuclear guests. I know what I'm talking about. But that's so much energy, and you're on a different planet. Energy is at a premium. Why waste it? Just it's like your dad in the winter. If you have the window open, it's like, we're just heating the outside. It's like we're just heating the Martian atmosphere.
Well, and I mean, NASA obviously operates on a budget. They have timelines. We're not actually building anything, so we got all this time to free think and come up with all this cool stuff, and then see if we can't theoretically make it work. NASA also has budgets. They have weight limits that they have to deal with. So all of this stuff kind of goes into that. Maybe if the mission went on long enough, or one of the things actually that I'm about to start working on is, and they didn't have this back in 2016 whenever they designed Krusty, but so something interesting to note about nuclear fuel is the way it's shaped affects how reactive the fuel is. And so most reactors today are cylinders. It's not terribly reactive. It's more reactive than a cube, but less reactive than a sphere. The reason we do that is, one, cylinders are easy to manufacture, they're easy to mold, and they're easy to cast, all that stuff. Spheres, it's really difficult to do. Well, one thing I want to see is, well, if I can make it, with additive manufacturing, 3D printing, what if I could, one of my tech advisor, my professor said, well, that's perfectly possible these days to make a spherical reactor. And so that's something that I want to try to do. I've got time to do it. So
I'll get to that, but I just thought of something. I don't know, maybe it wouldn't matter with interplanetary. What if you used all that heat? This is stupid. What if you used all that heat to I was just thinking what's the initial use of just heat in the atmosphere? What do we do? We had a bunch of guys in top hats going up in hot air balloons. What if you use that to raise a balloon to 500 feet, just perpetually held it up there, but you could use that as a makeshift radio tower to other would that make sense? Is there any benefit to having that versus, or are you just beaming up to a satellite and then relaying back to Earth? Is there no need for a radio tower?
I mean, most of the time, yeah. I mean, maybe in a survival scenario that'd be good. The problem is it's just getting that heat. It's trapping that heat. You can't just. I wouldn't recommend just taking the radiation disk off and then just slapping it in a weather balloon. But yeah, maybe if you're in a survival scenario and you could find a way to get all that energy into a balloon, yeah, maybe that could be great in a survival situation.
Yeah, but, so only so that's only some Mark Watney shit, but not.
Yeah, probably.
Okay, all right, whatever. All right. Noted. Yeah. So could you 3D print your fuel? Could you get a 3D printer for like uranium or
with
plutonium?
strides that have been made in additive manufacturing, you can actually like print. You can print in metals. So hypothetically, yes, you could print a reactor. Now, there's a lot of things that have to go into that. So one of the things that I'm doing is I'm trying to get a job currently with the Y-12 National Security Complex in Tennessee. I'm currently in their pipeline courses here at Texas A&M, and that position is called criticality safety. So criticality safety, basically, if you get too much mass of fuel in a space, you get a criticality accident. This has happened quite a bit, actually, in national labs and stuff, just as we've been learning more about radiation and how fuel works. And so, like, if you get 22 kilograms of uranium in a sphere and you just pack it real dense, you get a criticality accident, which is going to release a ton of radiation that's actually like really deadly to people. And so, like, if you wanted to print something, you could, but there has to be a lot of things that go into it to make sure that it's safe. Like, in theory, I would want to cast that in two hemispheres, keep them separate, and then when I finally want to make my reactor critical, I would slap them together, and then you'd have a reactor.
Some demon core shit.
Yeah, I don't want a demon core.
Yeah.
That stuff sucks.
Yeah. So, are there any synthetic fluids that could be manufactured that would just have like the ultimate specific heat? Or are you getting to a point where it's like you're dumping money into that and now you're offsetting any value of power production? Or do you not want something with like an infinite specific heat? Do you get right up to that, I guess, like heat of vaporization, enthalpy of whatever, and we get it right up to that point, and then I don't know what I'm talking about, but it's like, is that a goal? Do you just want like the most, like the thing that can take the most heat, or do you not want it to be is like more not better?
No, so that's kind of like that's the thermodynamics of it. Yeah, like ideally what you want is you want something that is infinitely hot and infinitely cold. You want like perfect heat sinks, right? Heat generation, and because then any heat you generate can then be transferred into the cold sink, and you can just infinitely reject heat, and through the turbine you can infinitely generate power. Now that's not possible. If we had a working fluid, and so part of that is, so all of our turbines currently are designed to run on steam, even in stuff like your sodium cooled reactors, and your lead cooled. Eventually, like, they have that primary loop, which is full of sodium or lead, and then they go into a heat exchanger, which then typically just boils water for us, and then makes the turbine spin, and that's how you generate electricity. If we could get something with an infinite heat sink, I'd be really interested to see in how, like, with it almost an infinite specific heat, I'd be really interested to see how that would work with other materials that we have, so like the piping stuff. Yeah. Because like one of the biggest problems we have with sodium cooled or lead cooled reactors is those coolants are at such a high temperature that they melt any pipes they travel through. So like part of that thing is the material science of it. Like, what do we need a steel or something that can hold that molten salt so that the pipes don't melt on us.
Yeah. What about something like, so I remember thinking, it's one of those, like, if the universe is expanding, what is it expanding into? I just remember thinking one day, I was like looking at like watching foundry videos, just dumping melted molten steel, and I was just like, man, that's so insane. But then I started to think like, well, what's holding the melted steel? Like, and it's Inconel. I didn't know this, but Inconel was also used. They coated it on the X-15, the rocket plane. They used it because they're just like, hey, we use this in foundries. Like, this thing's gonna be. Can you hear my dog by any chance?
No.
I just want to make sure the microphone's not picking it up. He's going nuts. But they're like, this thing can. Because that was the late 50s, and they're like, yeah, we're gonna just hit go and try to go Mach 7. We don't know what's gonna happen, and they're like, we might we might die, but at the very least, we want to make sure it doesn't melt. Let's control the variables we can control. I don't know how much Inconel they use, and I don't know how I don't know if the whole thing was plated or if it was just certain parts. But that was something where it was like, I mean, because we have problems now with hypersonics and material science. Granted, that was the first real hypersonic, just we didn't really know what we were doing. Is Inconel something you would use?
I've never heard of that material
Inconel.
before.
I always forget how to spell it. Spell it wrong and then it'll probably come up. Just spell it however you think it is, like Inkerne. But I think it's almost like kernel. It's like Inco Inconel. Conel. Try Inconel.
Incoel.
No, Conel.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm curious about that, actually. I haven't heard of that. We haven't talked about that in our class.
There's an awesome audiobook called like X-15 Diaries, and it's really dry, but it's like 30 hours, and it's just all the X-15 guys like reading their journals. Hey man, I can delay uploading this. You can you can snag it.
We can.
I was gonna say we can delay uploading it so you can snag credit for it. You don't want anyone else grabbing it.
Oh no, don't worry about that. I'm sure it's probably been considered in the industry. I'm just trying to think. So it says it's oxidation and corrosion resistant, which works for extreme environments subject to pressure. And I don't know, actually. That's really. I'll have to talk to my materials guy on that.
Dude, you should, because I remember looking it up and I was just like, that's such a cool metal, and then it just kind of stored in a little part in my brain and went away forever. And I was listening to this X-15 book, and they were like, and at that point, like the fastest, like Chucky Yeager, I think had just broken the sound barrier, and they're like, all right, let's go for 7 times that, like. Before the SR-71, 30 years before the shuttle, they're like, yeah, we're just going to light this thing and go. And they're like, we don't know what's going to happen in the hypersonic speed regime, but at the very least, like, let's control what we can control. And we're like, this thing doesn't melt. And we're like, code it. They're not going for fuel efficiency. They only got 90 seconds of fuel, so it's not like they're worrying about weight. But yeah, they used Inconel. I don't know maybe it was just wingtips. It might have been the whole thing. But dude, because they started to use ablative materials. They literally started to coat the X-15 in like this pink, almost like pencil eraser material, so that would burn off, so they could get to higher speeds before the metal started to burn. And because of that, they were like, well, let's have the absolute highest, like the strongest metal. So because apparently the ablative material would burn, it would like block the windows, and it was like fuck everything up. But yeah, they used Inconel. I was just thinking, like, what if you just got like a heat sink made of Inconel, and it was just like, bring it on.
Yeah, I don't know about it. Actually looks like it is used in the industry quite a bit.
I can see the gears turning in your head.
Yeah, like oh, that's really interesting. Yeah, so it has a really good tensile strength. Its melting point is freakishly high.
Yeah,
it's actually up there. So
it's higher than tungsten, right? Or no?
I don't know if it's better than tungsten. I do know it's probably around the same melting point as most commercial grade fuel, which is UO2, uranium oxide, and that has a melting point of 2,850 degrees Fahrenheit. Yeah, melting point of UO2 is 2,865 degrees centigrade. So it's still much higher than Inconel, but Inconel is also very high. So
yeah.
Super cool.
Yeah, I think if you got some... And dude, and that was... They used... In the 1950s, they were using it, and it was old technology. I'm sure if you just took some modern material science and tinkered with it, you could probably get Inconel 2nd gen, right? Inconel 2.0. I mean, think. It was old in the 50s.
Yeah.
So even if it was brand new in the 50s, now it's still 70 years old. You tell me some material science guru couldn't go in there and run some simulations on supercomputers and be like, yeah, we just got to add whatever, we got some weird whatever, but you got to put some copper in there or whatever. I don't know, but so with that, how much would I guess in the terms of like importance of all these things, efficiency, powertrain, how important is that the infinite specific heat of your heat sink? Is how big of a link in the chain is that in terms of...
So really, I don't know. Having an infinite specific heat in terms of a material, I don't know if it's as important as... So really, it's the... hold up. I'm going to find this equation so I don't screw it up. Really, what's more important is that for thermal efficiency and just power generation, in general, it's your heat sink. So we talk about Carnot efficiency is the big thing, which is going to be if you have perfect thermal efficiency, your efficiency is going to be 1 minus your energy out minus your energy in. So obviously your energy in is never going to be 0 because you can't divide by 0.
Yeah.
But if you can get your Q out to be infinite, so your Q out is essentially just super massively big. Eventually, your efficiency. Oh, hold on. Let me make sure I'm doing this right.
Is that like a frit, or is it? I remember in my physics textbook they used to always reference something. A Carnot engine, Carnot. Is that what?
Yeah, Carnot. Yeah. Basically, like as you get, if you can reject all of the heat you ever produce, then you have 100% thermal efficiency.
Yeah. Now you're getting into some Bob Lazar UFO stuff.
And so, I mean, that's really, physically, that's not possible. You can't ever, because of the way the universe works, you can't ever have perfect efficiency. You can get really close, though. And that's what we try to do. So reactors operate at about 32% thermal efficiency. So for every kilowatt, or for every 100 kilowatts of heat it puts out, it makes 32 kilowatts of electricity. And that's really good. The high temperature gas reactor that I mentioned earlier has a thermal efficiency of 42%. It's crazy. So we're trying to get there. The thing is, you want to use as much heat as you get. And so that's what we're trying for. But
what's the highest you can get? Can you not get past 50%? Or is that wrong? I thought you could get up to like 49. Or is that not the barrier? Is the barrier 100?
I don't know. I don't know for sure. I can't say yes or no to that question just because I guess the barrier technically is 100, but if you could ever approach 100, that'd be pretty impressive. You're probably going to get a Nobel Prize.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, it's pretty insane. So you good to do like 10 more minutes?
Yeah, I can do 10 more minutes.
Okay. So I was thinking, like, now, is there any way to transfer the energy produced from space? The idea of, like, you could have like a miles wide solar panel and use like microwave energy to beam it back to Earth. Could you like put something in orbit around Mars and, maybe it's not even solar. Like, I was just thinking, like, what if you could build a nuclear reactor and you could just have like a tenth of the safety regulations? Because it's like, it's in geosynchronous orbit. It's at 36,000 miles. It doesn't matter if it leaks. It doesn't matter if there's Chernobyl. Whatever. You didn't see it. It's not. There's no graphite rod tips in orbit. Who cares? It's like.
So there's some cause for concern of putting a reactor in space. One, I don't know about transferring energy through microwave radiation. That's interesting. I've never heard of that. I would mostly think that you would do it through batteries, which, solar and wind, that's what we used to harp on them all the time, is there's no battery tech that you could ever use to store all that energy. And so there's a big holdup right there just from sticking a reactor in space. The other one is maybe for Mars it would be okay. If it's in Earth, the problem is if it explodes, you could have radioactive material falling on people's head. That's actually something in our project a professor wanted us to touch on was, well, if the rocket goes up, there's a non-zero chance it will explode. Let's make sure we're not dropping a hot rock of radioactive material on some foreign country. Figure out a way to at least have it survive the fall.
Yeah, I guess that is true.
Or implode with the rocket. That's another thought we've had.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, what about something like Mars, where it's like, again, you kind of have this like infinite wasteland where it's like, if it comes down, it's only one of the things that's going to kill you on Mars. It's more of a Wild West out there, or even, I don't know, like a lunar colony. Is there room for like lesser? Actually, I only have you for a couple more minutes, so I don't want to go off into these stupid thoughts. So the guy I had on, the nuclear power operator, he talked about the efficiency of like aircraft carriers and nuclear submarine reactors. He said those are much higher than like civilian ones. Is there any chance that stuff would ever be brought to public use, or is that Uncle Sam slapping classified on it and putting a gun in your face?
I think really that comes down to the fact that they're very small. In reality, the amount of power they have to produce is going to be a lot smaller than a commercial grade reactor. Also, when you talk about subs and carriers, so most commercial reactors are going to use these big pools that just sit outside and they can get heat all day. Well, if you're in a submarine and you're 100 leagues under the sea, you have water that's pretty cold, and you can, you almost have that infinite heat sink. You've just got something that you can produce that's just really cold, and it's not going to get warmer by you just dumping your heat in there. So maybe that's where it comes from. I'm not sure. It might just come from the fact that the ocean it's an actual ocean of coolant.
It is an actual infinite heat sink. It's like, again, if you're heating up the ocean, you have bigger problems than your heat sink. Got 5 minutes. I got 5 minutes. Like I said, I keep people forever, so I have to like behave. So I had a guy on that's from Georgia Tech that's building a CubeSat. You know what a CubeSat is? The little like modular satellites, like the size of a shoebox.
Oh yeah,
they're really tiny. They're really inexpensive. He's building one called MemeSat, and it's gonna be crowdfunded, and it's gonna shoot back memes. It's also gonna be used for like education. Yeah, it's also gonna be for like education and like elementary schools and stuff. But the way it kind of captured the attention is it's MemeSat. So it's just gonna be you can literally submit your memes to it, and it'll just ping it back, kind of like Sputnik. Well, he and I got talking like, what if your sole intention was just speed? There was no, so you got to think about it. There's no, when I first brought it up, the people were like, well, it's going to take this long to get to Alpha Centauri. And it's like, who said anything about Alpha Centauri? We're not going, there's no specific direction we're going. It doesn't even have to be in the plane of the Milky Way. We can shoot it out in nowhere. If you used gravitational slingshots, right? Kind of like Voyager. And again, there's no mission, there's no taxpayers that you gotta report to. If you could just crowdfund whatever, X amount of dollars, and launch this thing, use slingshots to get it going as fast as you can, and then you'd use some like nuclear powered engine and just try to get it to accelerate for like 1,000 years. And really just try to get this stupid meme CubeSat going like a recognizable percentage of like light, like 10% light speed, or like some xenon ion thruster. Would you use nuclear? So the entire thing is like, there's no big cameras on it. There's no big radios. We're not doing research. This thing has a radio beacon just to let us know. We can use the Doppler effect to see how far it is. We're just going for speed. Would you use like a nuclear reactor for
if you are only going for speed, I would say you want to use an ion drive.
An ion drive, but to power it, because those huge solar panels those huge solar panels, those take if you can't tell, I've looked into this. Those huge solar panels, that's weight, and the ion drives, the most efficient NASA one can fire for 48,000 hours before it's a material problem. The grid dies. Yeah. So I was thinking like, what if you made like a 3-stage ion thruster, fired it for 48,000 hours, discharge, fire the next one. But you're going to get so far away that the size of the solar panels you're going to need, that's going to add so much weight, it's going to take away.
You could do it. I think you could. The only issue you're going to run into is, again, weight and just, how long is it actually going to produce power for you? Yeah. Because eventually the fuel will use itself up. It'll all burn out. If it's in the middle of deep space, it's, you have zero worry about radiation. Yeah. And so then you have two issues of, if we lose contact with it, could we continue to cool it down? Because eventually it'll get far enough away that you can't communicate with it anymore. It just becomes physically impossible. You could track it, but if it melts down and you break your satellite, well, then you've just kind of screwed up your mission. Yeah. So there's that problem. And there's a problem of eventually, even then, the fuel runs out. Like, depending on how big it is, your burnup will eventually, all the fuel is going to just become iron, because that's what everything in the universe wants to be, is iron.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's the end goal would just to be, whatever size it needs to be, whatever shape it needs to be, it would just be, and the idea is it would be a meme. and it would just kind of be like I want to get that farther away from Earth than Voyager. Like, screw the gold record. I want like a 1 terabyte hard drive of memes just hurtling through the universe at like 10% the speed of light. Yeah, and when I pose that question, I really don't have anything to follow up with it. It's just like, no, that's what it is. There's no science to it. So it's like, what's the purpose? Just speed. I've had him on before, Ken Mason. He was really good friends with Bob Truax, the guy that designed the Sea Dragon. And I was gonna say, because they use the Sea Dragon in that show For All Mankind, and it's shooting plutonium up to a lunar colony. But I'm having him on for the sole reason to talk about this hypothetical spacecraft. Well, dude, I will let you go.
All right. Well, thanks for having me on.
I would love to have you on again if you want to talk another time, man. I got infinite questions. If you have fun, yeah, man, let's do it again. And it just, if you can't tell, there's really no structure to it. It's just whatever floats up. And brother, I'll email you, man. Thanks for coming on, dude.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
All right, dude. Good luck with everything. Stay safe. Don't die from coronavirus. Godspeed.
All right.
All right,
you have a good one.
Peace.